Hello. Hello. It's the week after Christmas, before New Year's, which means time is wibbly wobbly and means nothing. How's it going, everybody? I don't have my green screen up because I wanted to see how my new camera does. So I got a new webcam for Christmas. It's very nice. My previous webcam, the base of it was like broken, so I had to very carefully like balance it in order for it to be useful to me. So I got a new webcam for Christmas that can actually screw in and stay onto my desk tripod. So it is reliably here now. It's good to see you all. Terror, fear, Disney. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, wonderful week. I don't know about the evil Sylveons. I think I'm not sure what that's about, but oh, thanks. I got a little bit of stuff just like sitting here that I need to go through, including a present for somebody that I have not seen to give it to them. But yeah, and you can see my cabinet that's here beside me reflected in the mirror point with my Bulbasaur plushie and other Rowlet plushie at the top, and then display things. Oh, I haven't looked at your Discord, Disney. You have a gift? Is it a real gift or is it a fake redeem? Oh, do you see Pupper? Montana. Yes, she's laying down right here now. Montana. Hi. She's like, I really don't give a flip about you. Okay. Alright, reset it. I moved things. Okay. How did you know about the fake redeem? It's what you do. Yeah. One time I was like, what do you want? Okay. So today we are going to start this book. I was going to start another book, but I was fiddling around with my webcam for too long, and then I was lazy and I didn't switch books. So we're going to read this one, which I had already set up in the layout. This is the book that Creature of Kapu Cave is supposedly loosely based on. I have read this one before. If I remember correctly, there's basically nothing the same with the exception of Nancy being in Hawaii. So we're just gonna enjoy it. Isn't this a great gift? Wow, Fear, how wholesome. Especially effective when you do the Fear Redeem in my channel. Yeah, where you don't have your affiliation turned on. I just spooked Montana. Mango Bubbly, not a sponsor. Maybe for my birthday this year, Tara will turn on his affiliation. That would be a great present. Shall we read? Oh, I got an itch. Like right at the corner of my skull. Okay. Nancy Drew, Mystery on Maui by Carolyn Keene. Chapter 1, Fun in the Sun. Heads up, Nancy. George Fane's voice rang out over the sound of the crashing surf. This one's awesome, and it's got your name on it. Nancy Drew waved at her friend and lined up her surfboard to catch the crest of the huge wave that was rolling in. I got it, George, she called. After paddling with her arms to launch the board into the wave, Nancy rose to her feet and easily caught her balance. She skimmed lightly across the 8-foot swell to the spot where the wave flipped forward. Then she rode the inside curl until it ran up onto the beach with a foamy crash. That was the best ride of the day, Nancy shouted to George, who had just cruised in behind her. Let's get Bess to try some surfing. Fat chance. George's tone was teasing but affectionate. That would mean she'd actually have to get off her beach blanket. Bess Marvin, George's cousin, preferred to spend her recreational time watching sports from the comfort of the sidelines. George was just the opposite. Lean and active, she loved to participate in any kind of sport. Both girls were Nancy's best friends. Did I hear someone say fat? Bess's voice drifted across the sand. George's petite cousin raised her blonde head from the blanket where she was sunbathing. I hope you're not talking about me, because we're on vacation here in Hawaii all week, and I refuse to think about dieting. Oh, too bad, Bess, because I just found out about this great Hawaiian pineapple diet, George said, shaking the seawater from her dark brown curls. It's guaranteed to work, or else you get a free plane ticket to return to Hawaii anytime. George stopped just in time to duck a wadded-up towel that Bess had lobbed at her. Don't worry, Bess, we weren't talking about you, Nancy said, lowering herself into a beach chair. Besides, you know you look fantastic in that suit. Bess was wearing a white one-piece bathing suit that set off her trim figure. Thanks. You look good too, Nancy, Bess replied. I noticed a few guys checking you out as you were riding that last wave. There was one guy I noticed. He was riding an aqua surfboard. He's cute, and a great surfer too. I saw him, George said. He's the one who did that amazing air flip. I've never seen anyone do that before except on TV. Well, I guess this beach is Surfer Central this week, Nancy said. Anyone big in the surfing world should be here for the competition. Nancy, Bess, and George had arrived on the Hawaiian island of Maui a few days before the start of the island's biggest surfing competition. The contest had drawn surfers from all over the world. The three friends were visiting for a week at the home of Danny Takamura, one of Nancy's friends who had spent his junior year of high school in River Heights. Nancy and Danny had become good friends during that year, and they'd stayed in touch ever since as email pen pals. The three girls were sprawled on a beach near Honolulu on the northwest coast of Maui. The white sand beach formed a long, graceful crescent between two hills. It was divided in two by a long wooden pier. Dotted with graceful coconut palms, the hills and beach framed a sparkling blue jewel of a bay. Right then, the bay was rolling with 10-foot waves. Don't look now, but there's an aqua surfboard heading our way, George said. What? Bess glanced in the direction that George was looking. Two tall guys were approaching. One of them was holding an aqua-colored surfboard. Bess bent her head toward Nancy. Oh my gosh, Nan, it's him, she whispered urgently. The cute one. I think I'm gonna die. How do I look? Pretty good for a person who's about to die, Nancy replied, suppressing a laugh. Hey, that's Danny with your surfer dude, and something tells me we're about to be introduced. Hey, you three, Danny called out his greeting. His voice rose pleasantly in the rolling Hawaiian accent that was common among those who had grown up on the islands. I want you to meet my buddy Josh, Danny said. He and I have known each other since 3rd grade. Even so, he's still a Malahini. That means he's a newcomer in Hawaiian. Yeah, well, I had to come over from California to save you islanders from losing all your surfing competitions, Josh said as he playfully punched his friend. Josh Brightman, he added, smiling down at Nancy and Bess. I'm the polite one. Josh was broad-shouldered and deeply tanned, with a shock of sun-bleached golden brown hair that spilled over his forehead and curled in back almost to his shoulders. The outer edges of his hazel eyes were lightly creased, from a life spent squinting in the sun, Nancy surmised. I saw you out there on the water, Bess said, the faintest sign of a blush rising to her cheeks. You're really good. Josh is a legend among us surfers, Danny said. He's hands down favored to win the Gulf Coast surf-off that starts this Saturday. Gulf Coast? That's what they call this western part of Maui, isn't it? I guess you really did read all the guidebooks I sent you, Nancy, Danny said with a chuckle. Gulf Coast is also the name of a sports store that's big in Hawaii and California, Josh said. They're the primary sponsor of the contest this week. It's a big event for them in many ways. They're adding a line of surfboards, and this is a great way to let people know about it. Danny rubbed his hands together with anticipation. Just think, Josh, only 3 more days until you win that prize money. 75,000 big ones. $75,000? George let out a small gasp. Josh grinned. Yeah, it's big money, but I'm not spending it yet. There's a lot of great surfers signed up to compete. Any one of them could win. No chance, Josho, Danny said, opening the cooler he and the girls had packed back at his house. He pulled out some cans of soda and handed them around. You've got it nailed. There's no one here who knows the local waters like you do. Well, Jojo Sargent and Kiko Man were favored to win. Josh set down his board and took a soda from Danny. But both of them had to drop out of the contest pretty suddenly. Tough break for both of them. Jojo came from the mainland and Kiko from Japan to compete. They were the 2 top contenders. Why did they drop out? Nancy asked. Josh shrugged. Kiko got really sick all of a sudden. Food poisoning, they think? And Jojo had an accident and broke a leg. They're both laid up at the motel where all the out-of-town guys are staying. It's not unusual to have last-minute dropouts, but it's kind of weird that the top 2 guns got knocked out of the running like that. That sounds like a mystery for you, Nan. George nodded at Nancy. Nancy jokingly placed her hands on her hips. This vacation is strictly for R&R. Rest and relaxation. No mysteries, she said in a mock stern voice. Only fun and sun are allowed all week. Mysteries and adventure had a way of following Nancy Drew wherever she went. The 18-year-old daughter of criminal lawyer Carson Drew had already established a reputation as an excellent detective by solving a number of difficult cases. You guys may be here to take it easy, Josh said, but I've got work to do. I have to sign up for the opening heat at the sponsors tent. Then I'm going to hit the surf again. Would you like to come along? He was greeted with a resounding yes from the group. I'd love to, but I don't know how to surf, Bess replied uncertainly. I'll give you a lesson, Josh offered. He took Bess's hand and helped her to her feet. Josh and Bess walked a little ahead of the others, talking and laughing as they headed down the beach toward the blue and white striped sponsors tent next to the main pier. Bess seems to like Josh, George whispered to Nancy. I have not seen her blush like that in a while. Nancy nodded. Well, she's right about one thing. He is cute, and he seems nice, too. She paused and glanced out over the ocean. I'll bet you're thinking of someone right now, George said. Nancy gave her friend a little smile. You're a mind reader, George. I was just thinking how nice it would be to walk along this beach at sunset with Ned. Ned Nickerson, whom Nancy dated, was attending classes back home at Emerson College. The sight of Bess and Josh having fun made Nancy realize how much she missed Ned's sparkling brown eyes and good sense of humor. The Gulf Coast sponsors tent was a beehive of activity. Surfers clustered in front of a registration table. Be back in a sec, Josh said to his friends as he joined the other surfers at the booth. Nancy was checking out a display of t-shirts when she sensed that someone was watching her. She turned around and saw a man standing slightly apart from the other surfers. The man, who seemed to be in his early 20s, had a shiny black surfboard and an arrogant look on his bronzed face. He nodded to Nancy without smiling. Who's that guy with the black surfboard? Nancy whispered to Danny when he walked over to join her. Danny followed Nancy's gaze. Oh, that's Hank Carter, he said slowly. We call him the Lone Wolf of Maui. He's a few years older than we are and he keeps to himself, even though we all know him while we were growing up. We all knew him while we were growing up. He's super competitive, gets bent out of shape during a contest like this. Just then Nancy felt another set of eyes on her, these from a woman with long, silky, white blonde hair. She was standing next to Hank. The girl shot Nancy a sharp look. She tapped Hank on the elbow to get his attention. He gave Nancy one final glance before turning his attention back to his friend. I guess you're Hank's no lone wolf when it comes to girls, Nancy commented as she and Danny rejoined their friends outside the tent. Danny laughed. Yeah, on that score, he's more of what you might call a real lady killer. Josh greeted them outside the registration area. He had a surfboard under one arm and his registration forms in his free hand. Let's head back to the spot where you were sunbathing, he said. The surf's a little calmer there, and that'd be a better place for Bess's lesson. A short while later, Josh led Bess into the water while Nancy, George, and Danny stretched out on their towels. Nancy took out a selection of local fruit, guava, mango, pineapple, and papaya from the cooler. This I have to watch, George said gleefully as Bess took Josh's surfboard. If only I had a camera. If anyone could get Bess out there, it would be Josh, Nancy said. Look, he actually has her on the board. Bess was riding the surfboard on her stomach for a while to get the feel of it, Nancy assumed. Then she saw Josh showing Bess how to rise to a standing position. She's waiting for a good set of waves, Nancy said with delight. Bess hugged the board for a while, then rose uncertainly to her feet. She raised her arms as if she were on a balance beam, leaning first to one side, then the other. Wobbling right, then left, and forward, and back she goes. Tough break for the rookie, George called out like a sports announcer, as Bess tumbled backward off the board, directly into Josh's arms. Well, at least she had a soft landing, Nancy said with a grin. Just then Nancy noticed a blur of motion to her left. A scruffy-looking man had emerged from the low-lying brush near a stand of palms. His head was shaved, and he had a stubble of beard. The man sprinted toward the waterline. Boy, he's really hot-footing it, Danny commented. Yeah, Nancy replied. Why do you suppose... To their surprise, the man made a beeline for the spot where Josh's surfboard had drifted to the shore. He grabbed the board and hoisted it above his head. Look at that, Nancy cried, already on her feet. That guy's stealing Josh's board. We gotta stop him. End of chapter 1. Oh my gosh. If I have to have one more surfer boy described to me in excruciating detail, Okay, let's catch up on the chat. The gift that keeps giving me money. That's right. Don't give in to the peer pressure terror like I do, or do. Well, now I'm in a dilemma, Disney. She said that, and you said don't give in to peer pressure, so I am either way. Ah, the focus on the insecurity of a girl's weight. This is the content we need. I know. It's like a terrible intro chapter. I refuse to believe Nancy is actually good friends with anybody with how all she does is butt into personal lives for her own gains. No, not dollars. Big ones. Jumbo shrimp. I would be okay with... what was it? How much? I don't remember. $75,000 jumbo shrimps. Mysteries had a way... Oh, food poisoning from lackluster shrimp, probably. Mysteries had a way of following Nancy. No, they do not. She just pries into personal lives and insists on solving problems nobody asked her. Cute and nice. That's right. Hi, Oscar. Once again, Nancy thought to herself, why would I invite Ned when I can hang out with shirtless, muscular guys without him? That's what I'm saying. Like, why do we... It's like, let's describe these hunks and then pretend like Nancy cares that Ned's not there. Thank you for shouting out, Oscar. Hank Hill, the lone wolf of Maui. Wolves don't surf, stupid. Birds, however. Thank you for the claps. He was a surfer boy. Oh, hi, Susan. How are you? It's wonderful to see you. How was your Christmas? Bird is the word, didn't he? How are you guys doing? I love how the cover, so obviously I always pick the same cover. It says surf's up and so is the crime on Nancy's Hawaiian holiday. Like somebody wrote that and the editors were like, oh, that's the one. That's the one. I just think that's funny. Surf's Up is so the returns book. I don't want this anymore. Okay. It was good. How was yours? About time you streamed at a good time for me. I'm so sorry. I have not really been streaming frequently at all. So you haven't missed too much. I will tell you that. My Christmas was very good. I got to be pretty lazy, which is nice because there aren't many opportunities for me to be lazy lately. So, yeah, doing good. Okay, shall we continue on? I will say, I feel like this camera makes my skin look so nice. Like, I feel like my skin looks so, like, even and glowy. I'm like, wow, I look like I've been edited. I think this is the camera, though. Like, my skin has been doing pretty good lately. Because I like the skincare I've been using. But I just feel like this camera is very nice. It gives, like, a nice, I don't know. Unless it's just, like, a combination of the light coming through my window or what. But I just feel like I kind of look nice. Oh, I always look sexy. I don't... thank you. That's not the intention. Not the look I was going for, but I suppose I appreciate it. Yeah, laziness for the win for sure. I'm my own toughest critic, but I look amazing. I'm feeling confident right now, that's all. It's Maybelline. I don't use Maybelline, okay? I use Bare Minerals. Alright, let's move on. Chapter 2. Hot Pursuit. Nancy dug her heels into the soft sand to gain ground on the man who had grabbed Josh's surfboard. The thief was very fit and very fast. He covered a lot of ground quickly, even while carrying the bulky board. Nancy had to double her speed to narrow the distance between them. Once or twice, Nancy saw the man glance over his shoulder and abruptly change course. The two now zigzagged directly across the shore toward a rocky breakwater. "Stop right there!" Nancy shouted as they neared the structure. The thief hesitated for a second and glanced about for an escape route. As she moved in, Nancy saw he had a tattoo that circled his right arm. The design made it look as if a black snake was slithering up the entire length of his arm. The man heaved Josh's surfboard against a boulder at the base of the breakwater. Then he darted for the nearest line of trees and disappeared from view. Nancy sloshed through the surf and clambered onto the boulders to retrieve Josh's board. Examining it, she saw that there were some dents along the runner, but the board was basically intact. Danny and George came running up behind Nancy. "Are you okay?" George asked with a worried expression. "I'm fine, but I'm not sure about Josh's board. It looks pretty banged up," Nancy replied. Nancy, George, and Danny headed back to the spot on the beach where they left their cooler and chairs. Josh and Bess were waiting anxiously for them, along with a cluster of onlookers who'd been attracted by the commotion. "We didn't see what happened. We just saw you three suddenly take off down the beach like a pack of dogs chasing a cat," Josh said. He took the surfboard from Nancy. "Thanks for saving my board. I'd hate to think that you took a risk like that." Nancy described the man who took the board. Neither Danny nor Josh could recall seeing anyone who fit that description. A snake tattoo winding all the way up his arm? That's too weird. George shook her head. "We have to call him the Snake until we find out who he is." "Snake is a perfect name for a creep like that," Nancy said. "Why do you think someone would steal a surfboard?" She addressed the question to Josh. "Does that happen much?" "No, this is unusual," Josh replied, "especially considering the board's pretty old. It doesn't have any market value except to me. I call this board old magic. I've won so many competitions with it that I can't imagine competing without it. It's kind of a superstition, I guess." "That's interesting," Nancy said, staring off in the distance. "I can see the wheels turning behind those blue eyes of yours," George said. "What are you thinking, Nancy?" "I was remembering what Josh said about the other two top surfers having to drop out of the contest this week because of unusual mishaps," Nancy replied. "And now this Snake guy tries to steal Josh's board." "You think there could be a connection?" Bess's eyes widened. "I think it's a possibility," Nancy replied slowly. "Someone could be trying to drive the top surfers away from the contest this week." "But why?" George looked puzzled. Nancy shrugged. "That $75,000 prize is a lot of money. Maybe someone is trying to better the chances of another surfer. People have been known to commit crimes for a lot less money." "No way." Josh shook his head. "Surfers don't operate like that. It's proving yourself against the waves that counts, not competing against other surfers. The money is just secondary." "That's the way losers think?" A voice cut into the conversation. Nancy turned to see Hank Carter standing just behind her. Close up, she could see his dark eyes and brooding expression underneath his short cropped hair. The same girl was with him. "The judges aren't going to give the prize money to the surfer who tries the hardest. The money goes to the surfer who wins," Hank said to Josh. "If all you think about is money, then you're the loser, Hank," Josh retorted. Hank shrugged and glanced down at Josh's surfboard. "Speaking of losing, I saw you blow off your board while you were goofing around in the water," he said with a hint of a smile. "Lucky for you, this lovely lady rescued it for you," he added with a sidelong glance at Nancy. "Come on, Hank, let's get out of here," the blonde girl interjected with an irritated voice. She shot Nancy an icy look. "All right, Marissa," Hank replied. "Catch you later." He addressed Josh as he left. Josh grimaced. "Great exit line. Catch you later," he muttered under his breath. "Let him try. That guy's always trying to get me riled." "What kind of a competitor is Hank?" Nancy asked Josh. "Aside from his being a lousy sport, I mean. Is he a good surfer?" Josh paused to consider Nancy's question. "Now that JoJo and Kiko have dropped out, I would say that Hank's my main competition," he replied. "He doesn't have a lot of natural talent, but he makes up for it with discipline and sheer nerve. Hank never gets rattled out there on the waves, which is hard to do when you're staring at a 2-story wall of water about to crash down on your head." "Hank's girlfriend didn't seem too happy," Bess observed. Josh grinned. "Marissa is kind of a snob. We call her the Ice Princess." Danny was examining Josh's surfboard. "What do you think, Josh?" he asked his friend. "Worth trying to repair her?" "You bet." Josh ran a hand gently down the board's runner. "A little resin and a once-over with a fiberglass cloth, and she'll be good as new. I could pick up some repair stuff at Ruby's." "Ruby's?" Nancy asked. "Is that someone's house or someone's store?" "It's a store," Josh replied. "Ruby's place is a surf shop near the fishing marina in Lahaina," Danny added. "It's named after the owner, Ruby Blackwell. She's really cool." "Mind if I tag along when you go?" Nancy asked. "I'd like to check out the fishing marina." The Snake was wearing what looked like fisherman's clothes. Maybe someone there has seen him before. "Sure," Josh replied. "Why don't we go now? You're coming too, Bess?" he asked hopefully. Of course, Bess said happily. Leaving George and Danny behind to surf some more, Nancy and Bess rode in Josh's van to the nearby seaside town of Lahaina. At the center of town, a marina bustled with the activity of sailboats and fishing vessels. As they looked for a spot to park the van, Josh explained that the group had been settled in the 1800s by a group of New Englanders. That's why it looks like a quaint East Coast fishing village, he said. Ruby's place was nestled among picturesque shops and restaurants that overlooked the marina. As they parked, Nancy could see a group of young surfers hanging out in front of the shop, with their boards propped up against the storefront. Looks like this is a really popular spot, Nancy commented to Josh as he unloaded his surfboard from the back of the van. Josh nodded. We all like to hang here. Ruby's our local celebrity, he explained. She was a world-class surfer before she quit to open this place. He lowered his voice as they entered the shop. She and Hank kind of used to be a team, but they split up a couple of years ago. I don't think he's been serious about anyone since her. Josh Brightman, is that really you? A female voice exclaimed. Ruby Blackwell greeted Josh with a hug. You haven't come here once this month. What have you done to old Magic? She said, eyeing his surfboard. Made a mess of her, I'm afraid, Josh replied. Ruby, I'd like you to meet my friends from the mainland, Nancy and Bess. They're visiting Danny Takamura this week. Ruby nodded hello to Nancy and Bess. Ruby was every bit the celebrity that Josh had described. Tall and thin, she had a striking face with high cheekbones and a caramel-colored complexion. She wore her jet black hair pulled to one side in a thick braid. Her outfit, a sarong and halter top, made her look like a modern-day Hawaiian princess. Adorning Ruby's bare midriff was an unusual piece of jewelry, a sparkling navel ring set with tiny red jewels that looked like real rubies. Josh showed Ruby his damaged board. The young shop owner knelt down to examine it. I'm afraid you may not be able to do cutbacks the same even if you repair her, Josh, she said, looking up at him. I can lend you one of my stingers for the Gulf Coast if you'd like to try it. She pointed toward a row of sleek tri-fin surfboards that were displayed on the wall. Josh smiled and shook his head. I've heard your stinger's an amazing new design, but this week I need to ride something tried and true. Josh told Ruby how Nancy had rescued his board. It would have been a goner for sure, except for her, he said, touching Nancy's arm. She really hot-dogged after that slob and saved the day. Good for you, Nancy. Ruby gazed at Nancy with new interest. Nancy described the would-be thief, including his snake tattoo. Have you ever seen anyone around here who looks like that? She asked Ruby. Ruby thought for a moment. No, and I know everybody here in Lahaina, she replied. He's probably from off island. Nancy's gonna help us get to the bottom of everything, Josh said. Back where she comes from, she's helped the police solve lots of crimes. I'll let you know if I hear anything, Ruby said. A beeping noise sounded from the back of the shop. That's my computer's alarm clock, Ruby said. I have it rigged up to go off when an email message comes in.
That don't beat all. I've read every single book that gal's ever written.
Oh look, AV stream.
I have it rigged to go off when an email message comes in, she said as she headed for the back. I'd like to check around the fishing docks, Nancy said to Josh when Ruby was out of earshot. I want to see if anyone's seen the snake around here. Good plan, Josh said. He purchased his repair supplies from a clerk at the front counter and they headed back outside. One of the young surfers in front of the shop greeted them. Hey Josh, the boy said eagerly. You tried Ruby's stinger yet? They say that board really rips out there. Josh gave the kid a thumbs-up sign as he, Nancy, and Bess headed to his van to stow the board and supplies. Amateur surfers think some high-tech new board will make the difference for them out on the waves, he said as he loaded his board into the back of the van. But it's the quality of the surfer, not the equipment, that counts. They crossed the street to the marina where a network of wooden docks extended into the harbor. They passed two fishermen on deck. The two men stood over a plastic tub and poured their morning's catch into it. The silver fish gleamed in the sunlight as they cascaded down. Yuck. Bess wrinkled her nose at the odor. Fish is definitely off the menu for me tonight, she stated. Nancy's eye was drawn to a big boat that was just docking. Painted along the entire length of the 40-foot vessel was a white shark. The painted shark had its jaws open wide as if it were about to attack. A sign hanging on the side of the boat said, Captain Fry's Shark Attack. See gaping jaws of death, in blood-red letters. Shark Attack? Nancy read the sign in a puzzled tone. What is that? Josh's expression darkened. I can't believe that Fry's at it again, he said through clenched teeth. I thought we shut him down for good last week. Russell Fry runs a shark feeding operation, Josh explained. Fry and his crew take tourists out to the reef and dump loads of chum, a mixture of meat and fish, into the water to attract sharks. The blood in the chum drives the sharks into a feeding frenzy. Isn't that dangerous? Bess shivered. It sure is, Josh replied. For the sharks as well as people. Because the sharks get used to being fed by people, they have to be killed when they get too close to the beaches. Josh explained that he had recently led an effort by a local environmental group to shut down the shark feeding operation. We got the MPA, that's the Marine Protection Agency, to clamp down on Fry just last week, and now he's out here again breaking the law. A couple of crew members on the boat lowered a small gangplank. Moments later, a burly bearded man emerged on deck and disembarked. He had a sour look on his face. Josh stepped forward. "Hey, Fry, what's up?" he greeted the captain in a challenging tone. Fry stopped dead in his tracks and glowered at Josh. "You better watch your step, bright man." He snapped. "I know you and those bleeding heart fish huggers were behind that MPA ruling by the state." "Maybe you should watch out, Fry," Josh replied angrily. "I'm sure the authorities would like to know that you're violating the law right now." "Oh, yeah?" Fry went nose to nose with Josh. Meanwhile, his two crew members silently moved in and closed ranks behind their boss. "You've made a mistake messing with me." Fry's tone was soft but deadly. "Now you'll learn a lesson." Fry reached for something long and gleaming at his belt. Nancy felt a pang of fear at what she saw. Fry's hand was hovering over a large, jagged-edged fishing knife. He didn't seem afraid to use it, either. End of chapter 2. Let's see. Examining it, she determined this is indeed a surfboard. "Hey, Puffy. Thank you for subbing for 49 months, HS. I really appreciate that." The Sorfer? Yeah, I said that really weird. How am I gonna save the game? How am I gonna save the game, Oscar? There's no game to save. Hang on, I need to respond to a message. Okay. I did use a bookmark. Thanks for shouting out HS and Puffy. Oh, I'm sure Puffy appreciates the follow. Okay. I'm going to try to read 3 more chapters. Hi, Car. How's it going? Thanks for shouting out Car. Yay, 3 more chapters indeed. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Chapter 3. One False Move. Adrenaline coursed through every vein in Nancy's body as she anticipated the captain's next move. Would Fry dare pull a knife on Josh in a crowded dock in broad daylight? Josh was frozen, staring at Fry's hand poised over a fishing knife. Fry didn't make a move. Ever seen a fish that was gutted by one of these? Fry said in a menacing tone. He tapped the knife's metal handle. It makes a real mess, believe me. Nancy steeled herself to help fend off a knife strike by Fry. Behind him, Fry's crew exchanged wary glances. There was a tense moment as they all seemed to hold their breaths, waiting for what would happen next. Nancy glanced swiftly at Bess. Her friend's hands were trembling slightly. Stay calm, Bess, Nancy silently urged. This was not the time to panic, she knew. Fry lunged at Josh. Nancy's foot shot out and back quickly, causing the captain to trip. Fry staggered as he tried to keep from falling. With arms flailing, he fell sideways over the edge of the dock and landed in the water with a huge splash. For a second, everyone stared open-mouthed at the sight of Fry thrashing around in the harbor like a wounded sea lion. Then Fry's 2 crewmen let out a roar of laughter. Their outburst infuriated Fry, and he let loose a string of insults at his men. Fry continued to bluster while getting out of the water as Josh and Nancy led a hasty retreat from the scene. Bess released her tension in a fit of nervous giggles. That Captain Fry looked so ridiculous when he fell overboard, she said, gasping with laughter. Cool move, Nancy, Josh said with admiration. You made it look like he tripped over his own feet. Fry deserved it, Nancy commented. What a creep. When they had almost made it back to the van, they bumped into Ruby Blackwell. She was holding a computer printout in her hand. Hey, what's going on, you guys? She asked. Josh described their run-in with Fry. Ruby shook her head disapprovingly at Josh. You shouldn't mess with him, she said. You know as well as I do that Fry can be really dangerous. Just last month he got thrown in jail for fighting. Josh set his jaw stubbornly. I could have handled Fry, he muttered. He's not so tough. Oh yeah? It sounds like you handled him real well. Ruby made a clucking sound with her tongue. It sounds to me as if you needed help twice today from your friend Nancy. Josh sighed. I guess you're right, Ruby. I should probably learn to pick my battles more carefully. At least my battles with Fry. What do you know about Fry? Nancy asked the shop owner. Fry's a Kema'ana. Kema'aina. An islander. Ruby explained to Nancy and Bess. He and I grew up in the same village near here. Back then he was a bully too, but he never bothered me or my family. Now, though, he seems to be out of control, so I stay away from him. Ruby held up the pages in her hand. I followed you guys from the shop to tell you about the weather bulletin I got. We just pulled it off the internet, she said, handing the sheet to Josh. I'm afraid it may be bad news for the competition. Nancy peered over Josh's shoulder to read the weather advisory. A major tropical storm was bearing down on the island, it said. The storm would likely hit on Saturday, the same day that the Gulf Coast surf-off was scheduled to begin. How bad do you think the storm will be? Nancy asked them. Bad enough, Josh replied simply. They've already issued warnings for small craft and swimmers, he added, tapping the printout. It sure doesn't look like a storm is coming, Bess looked up at the sky. The cloudless horizon was serene and blue as a robin's egg. Josh smiled. You won't see any actual storm clouds for a while, Bess. Right now the danger for swimmers is the killer riptides. A big offshore storm like this one creates a big pressure system that acts like a giant suction cup, pulling water away from the beaches, Ruby explained. Nancy was struck by a sudden thought. George and Danny are still surfing back at the beach, she exclaimed. That's right, maybe the lifeguards there haven't heard about the riptide alert yet. Josh sounded worried. We'll have to look for the surfboard thief later on, Nancy said. Right now we better go warn the others about riptides. Let's do it, Josh responded. They walked Ruby to the surf shop and hightailed it back to the beach in Josh's van. I don't see them anywhere, Nancy said. She, Josh, and Bess had arrived back at Honolulu Beach to find Danny and George. The 3 of them stood near the Gulf Coast tent, scanning the beach and the pier area for any sign of their friends. The ocean's swell had increased several feet since they'd left only a few hours earlier. Above them, the sky was still clear and calm. The peaceful scene gave no clue that a dangerous undertow was building just beneath the surface of the water. Maybe they went to get a snack or something? Bess suggested. I hope you're right, Nancy replied. When they arrived, they had seen a lifeguard setting out a warning sign that read danger, no swimming. Another guard had been using a megaphone to order swimmers out of the water. I'll go tell one of the guards that we can't find our friends, Bess said. Good idea, Nancy said. Josh and I will check our spot on the beach to see if Danny's surfing gear is still there. I'll catch up with you, Bess replied. Nancy broke into a semi-trot as she and Josh made their way down the beach. She kept her eyes fastened on the sea until they reached the spot where they'd parked the cooler and chairs. George's and Danny's surfboards were the only things missing, she noted with dismay. That meant they were probably still out on the ocean somewhere. Nancy questioned a couple of young surfers who were lounging on their boards on the sand. The boys shook their heads when Nancy asked them if they'd seen anyone still surfing. Haven't seen anyone out there since they posted those no swimming signs down the beach, one of them said. We stayed in until a lifeguard chased us out. Bummer that we have to miss all this monster surf. Nancy thanked them for the information. Josh shook his head as he and Nancy walked away. We call those real young surfers Groms, he said to Nancy. They're full of enthusiasm, but they've got a lot to learn about safe surfing. They walked to the water's edge. Nancy held up a hand to block the glare of the late afternoon sun as she scanned the horizon. At last she spotted two heads bobbing far out in the water and then caught a glimpse of George's red-striped surfboard. There they are, Nancy exclaimed to Josh. After cupping her hands over her mouth to form a megaphone, she shouted, George! Danny, come back in! She shouted a few times but soon lowered her hands. It was no use, she realized. They were much too far out. Even if she had used a bullhorn, she couldn't have been heard from that distance over the roar of the surf. I wonder if they realize how far out they've drifted. Josh sounds uneasy. That's why riptides are so dangerous. The current pulls you out so slowly you don't realize you're in trouble until it's too late. Josh, can you go find Bess and the lifeguard? Nancy said urgently. Maybe they have a rescue boat. I'll stay here and keep an eye out so we don't lose sight of them. You got it. Josh called over his shoulder, already on the move. While Josh headed back toward the pier, Nancy kept an anxious watch. She could see Danny catch a wave and began to cruise to shore. Soon George was standing on her board and steering right into the curl of a towering 20-foot wave. You can do it, George, Nancy silently urged. For a while things went smoothly, then all of a sudden the solid wave appeared to break up because of a cross-current. The lip of the wave's curl collapsed, causing a 2-story wall of water to come crashing down on top of George's head. Nancy caught her breath as George's surfboard catapulted through the air. Where is she? Nancy thought anxiously. Then she spotted her. George had been thrown off the board and was in the water. Her arms churned furiously as she fought her way through the waves back to the board, but it seemed to Nancy that her friend was starting to weaken. George's head disappeared under a white cap. When she reappeared, she was farther out in open sea. As Nancy watched helplessly, George was tossed high by one rolling wave, then crashed down with the next. Her head disappeared from view again. Nancy felt an electric shock run through her body as she realized what was happening. Her best friend George would drown if Nancy didn't get help fast. End of chapter 3. Going good, just got back from brunch with one of my best friends. Ooh, what'd you have? I'll be listening while trying to rest from work. Okay, I hope your rest goes well. I have a drink. Thank you, though, Susan. Thank you for banning the bot. Ooh, hot chocolate. Isn't it like 4:45 a.m. for you, Susan? Thank you for the claps. 2 more chapters to go. Got an omelet with onion, spinach, and tomatoes. No, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it too much. Oscar and counting. On December 28th, the rule says thou shalt not end on odd number chapters. Well, too bad. According to the Book of Oscar, it's a New York Times bestseller. Yes, I hope work goes by smoothly and fastly and goodly for you. Okay. Shall we move on? Yes. Chapter 4. Too Close for Comfort. Nancy glanced around desperately for something to use to reach George. She knew she had to act quickly. Time was running out. She dashed back to the spot where the young surfer-groms were lounging on their boards. "I need to use your board," she shouted to one boy. "There's a riptide warning up," the startled boy replied. "My friend's in trouble," Nancy stated simply, taking the board from the outstretched hands of the grom. Nancy took a running leap into the surf to launch herself, not worrying about her own safety. She lay stomach down on the board and paddled furiously with her arms, heading for the spot where George's head had disappeared. Her progress was slowed by the rise and fall of the ocean's swell. Nancy scanned the area for George, but saw no sign of her friend. Then all at once she spotted her drifting far off to the left. Nancy couldn't tell if George was conscious. Had she arrived too late? Nancy wondered, fighting off a sense of panic. At that moment, Nancy's attention was drawn by a noise near shore. She turned her head in time to see a figure streak into the water from the pier. The man had on the bright orange swim trunks worn by lifeguards on the beach. With an awesome display of strength and speed, the lifeguard's muscular arms sent up a spray of glistening water as he sliced his way through the waves toward George. Nancy and the lifeguard reached George at almost the same moment. The lifeguard pulled out a brightly colored plastic square that automatically inflated to become an emergency float. He placed the float under George's shoulders. "Let's push her up onto your board," he instructed Nancy. Together, the lifeguard and Nancy pushed a limp George onto the surfboard. Nancy assisted him with a numb sense of shock. It was hard to register what was happening to her friend. The lifeguard was gently turning George's head to clear her nasal passages of seawater. Soon they heard the low buzzing sound of a boat's engine approaching. "Here comes rescue," the lifeguard said. One of the lifeguards whom Nancy had seen on the beach earlier pulled alongside them in an emergency boat. She idled the engine and helped them pull George onto the boat. The other lifeguard performed CPR while they raced back to shore. Bess, Josh, and Danny stood in an anxious huddle along with a group of onlookers back at the beach. The lifeguard stretched George onto the sand and continued performing CPR. Bess's face was ghostly pale. Her eyes were full of fear as she looked down at her cousin lying on the beach. "Nancy, is she breathing?" she said. Nancy gave Bess a quick hug. Nancy's own heart was too full of worry at that moment to reply to the question. "Come on, George," she whispered urgently under her breath. "Hang in there, don't give up on us." After an agonizingly long minute, George flinched and coughed up a lungful of seawater. Her eyes slowly fluttered open, and she looked up at Nancy and Bess with a dazed expression. "What's up?" she murmured. "George!" Nancy said with relief as she clutched her friend's hand. "Thank goodness you're okay!" Bess cried. A cheer went up from the people who were looking on. "You're going to be okay now, George," the lifeguard said. "We just need to get you to emergency where you can be checked by a doctor." "Way to go, Manny," Josh said to the lifeguard. "This is our ace rescue guy, Manny Manolo," he said to Nancy and Bess. "I'm no ace compared to you, right, Josh?" Manny rebuffed Josh's praise as he briskly attended to George. I guess that's because some of us get messed up by other people's mistakes," he continued. His tone sounded bitter, Nancy noticed. Josh shrugged and shook his head. "Whatever you say, Manny," he said, looking away. Nancy briefly wondered what was behind the lifeguard's bitterness. She would have to ask Josh about it, but later. Right now, her main concern was George. "Are you comfortable enough?" Danny's mother, Tara Takamura, handed George a cup of steaming herbal tea. George was propped up by numerous pillows and cushions in the guest bedroom of Danny's house. Nancy sat next to her in a chair. "I'm fine. Thanks, Mrs. Takamura." George smiled as she took a sip of the hot drink. "Good to have you back in the world again." Nancy smiled warmly at her friend. "The emergency room doctor said George is going to be fine. She just needs lots of rest and liquids," Danny's mother told Nancy. "I'll be mixing in a generous portion of that island hospitality we call Aloha Spirit," she added. "There's nothing better for you than my island green tea," she said to George. "I'm so grateful to everyone," George said as she took a sip of the fragrant tea. "I'll be back to check on you in a little while, George," Nancy promised as she stepped outside the room. Josh, Bess, and Danny were waiting in the hallway. "How is she?" Josh asked. "She's okay," Nancy replied. "Talk about a narrow escape." "If it hadn't been for you and Manny Manolo," Danny shook his head as if to banish the thought. Let's go out on the deck, he said. I think I could use some of Mom's green tea. Nancy breathed in the fragrant night air as she, Bess, Danny, and Josh stepped onto the front deck overlooking the Pacific. Sunset had turned the sky into a pearly dome of pink and purple clouds, and the evening's tropical breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine. Nancy turned to Josh. Speaking of Manny, she said, what was going on between you two today back at the beach? He sounded angry with you for some reason. Yeah, I guess he is kind of sore at me, Josh replied. I know it sounds odd, but I think he blames me for ruining his chances at a career. His career? You mean as a lifeguard? Nancy asked. No, Josh shook his head. All his life, Manny's wanted to be a paramedic, he explained to Nancy and Bess. And he's perfect for a job like that. You saw him today. He's strong and skilled at saving lives. You're right, Bess said. Being a paramedic sounds just right for a guy like Manny, so what's his problem? Josh hesitated. Manny can't control his temper. Last summer, he and I did an internship with the Emergency Medical Training School. I managed to goof up one of our exercises, and Manny really blew his top. He went so overboard that the instructor kicked him out of the program. And he blames you for getting him kicked out, Nancy asked him. Josh nodded. Yes, he replied. I was hoping it had all blown over, but today he was sounding like he's still holding a grudge. It's too bad. We used to really be great friends. Isn't it kind of immature for Manny to blame you for his own bad behavior? Bess asked. Josh and Danny glanced at each other. Bess is right on that one, Josh, Danny replied with half a grin. But then no one's ever accused Manny of being mature. It's something he's just going to have to work out for himself. Josh stood up and stretched. It's been a long day, he said. Let's all get together tomorrow, shall we? He said. Good idea, Danny said. We'll come by in the morning and pick you up in my Jeep. We'll have brunch in town and then just see what we want to do. Sounds perfect. Just one more thing, Josh said. He reached past Danny and plucked 2 scarlet hibiscus flowers from a blooming shrub. For you, he said, offering the flowers to Bess and Nancy. Bess blushed and tucked the flower behind her ear. Thank you, Nancy said, and thanks for everything else. See you tomorrow. The next morning was Thursday, and Nancy was up with the sun. Noting that Bess was still asleep, Nancy tiptoed around, grabbed a robe, and silently stole outside to catch a view of the sunrise. She stepped onto the porch and looked out across the Pacific Ocean. Dawn had broken to reveal a flat, windless calm. There was no sign of the killer surf from the day before, she noticed. They call this the calm before the storm, Danny said, appearing behind her. You'd never know by looking out there that a big blow is coming our way. We won't be doing any surfing today, that's for sure, Nancy said, looking at the smooth, glassy water. Danny nodded. Hey, I know what we can do after brunch. How about some snorkeling? I know a great spot, Shipwreck Reef. There's an old sunken ship down there where you can see lots of great fish and marine life. Before leaving for town, Nancy and Bess carried a tray into George. Try this egg dish, George, Bess urged. It smells really good. I'm sorry I'm going to miss your snorkeling trip. It really sounds like fun, George said, taking a forkful of food. Dr. Tyler said you shouldn't get up until tomorrow, Nancy replied. George sighed. I know, but you know how hard it is for me to stay in bed all day, she complained. Hey, cousin, you're sounding cranky. That means you must be feeling better, Bess grinned. I guess you're right, George said with a laugh. Good thing Danny's got this great collection of sports mags, she said, pointing to a stack by the bed. I'll catch up on my reading while you're gone. Danny was standing near the front door next to a pile of snorkeling gear. Let's pick up Josh, then we'll head to Ruby's to rent some more masks and snorkels, he said. Nancy, Bess, and Danny headed outside and around the house to Danny's white Jeep, which was parked in the driveway. As she approached, Nancy spotted a white envelope that had been shoved under the windshield wiper. Looks like somebody left you a note, she said to Danny. Josh could have left it last night, Danny replied. Maybe he forgot to tell us something and didn't want to disturb us since it was kind of late. As Danny opened the note, tiny pieces of colored paper fell out of the envelope and onto the ground. Danny scanned the piece of paper, his face tense. You'd better look at this, Nancy, he said, handing her the note. Nancy smoothed open the piece of paper. The message inside was scrawled in heavy red marker. She read the note out loud. If you're Josh's friend, tell him to stay away from the Gulf Coast surf-off. If he competes, Josh Brightman is a dead man. Oof. End of chapter 4. The oof is not part of the book. That was my addition. Does Amazing Skin Lady here look like she follows the rules? It's just the camera. My skin isn't this good, although it has been improving. Not at all, Tara, not at all. Book of Oscar features a surprising amount of libel about Riddy. Manny Man Zero. Who is that? When we gonna meet a bad guy with offensive face paint? What? Oh, are you talking about Ransom of the Seven Ships? That's a different game. This is Creature of Kafu Cave. Yeah, this is Kafu Cave. Yeah, when we gonna make snow cones for a large man endlessly? Yeah, that's the right game. I was like, what? Yeah. So far, no snow cones, no creature, no Kapu Cave, no bug lady, no Pua, no Big Island Mike, no Hardee's. Literally, so none of this is the same. Hi, Coley. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for claps. Thank you for shouting out Coley. How are you doing? I have one more chapter to read today, and that's it. So it's going to be a short stream, as book streams tend to be. Plenty of, though, yeah. I'm assuming that this person falling off their board was supposed to be George, but they're also blonde. So maybe it's supposed to be Bess. I think this is supposed to be Josh. And is this Nancy? I suppose this is Nancy. Yeah, I don't know. Doing okay, been having some headaches, might have to call my doctor. Oh no! I hope you're doing well and had a nice Christmas. I did have a nice Christmas. Okay. My head only hurts when I think, so I avoid that as much as possible. I should try that. Okay. It might be hard to do some things without thinking at least a little bit, though. At least a little bit. Alright, last chapter of the day. Here we go. Okay, that's fair. You did say as much as possible. That's true. Okay, that's true. I shouldn't put words in your mouth. Okay. Chapter 5. Wipeout! This has got to be some kind of stupid prank, Nancy. Danny's voice rose in anger. Bess had picked up the pieces of paper that had fallen to the ground. This is a photo of Josh surfing and it's been slashed to pieces, she said with fear in her voice. Nancy shook her head. I'm afraid this is no prank, Danny, she said, looking at the note again. This threat against Josh makes one thing clear. Yesterday's attempt to steal his surfboard could have been part of a plot to keep Josh out of the surfing contest. Maybe someone else wants the prize money for himself, or maybe there's another reason altogether. She folded the paper back up and reached for the door handle to the Jeep. Let's go pick up Josh. A short while later, they arrived at Josh's apartment. The welcoming smile faded from his face when they showed him the threatening message. He followed them back to the car. Some crackpot must have sent this thing, he shrugged, tossing the note onto the hood of the Jeep. Josh was acting unconcerned, but Nancy could tell he was worried. We were hoping you could help us identify the person who wrote this note, Nancy told him. Do you recognize this handwriting? Josh picked up the paper and looked closely at the message. No, this handwriting is not familiar, he said at last. He raised his eyes suddenly. Do you think it could be the guy who ran off with my board yesterday, that snake guy? He asked Nancy. Nancy nodded. That thought did cross my mind, but then who else could be involved? Snake couldn't have been working alone. There has to be someone else who wants to scare you away from the surfing contest. Or worse, Bess said apprehensively. Remember the note said you'd be a dead man. Bess gave Josh a worried look. Maybe you should consider not competing? No way. Josh shook his head. I'm not going to let some joker run me off the biggest surfing contest of the year, he stated flatly. I agree with you, Josh, Nancy said. Let's go ahead with our plans for brunch and snorkeling today, she continued, but let's all be super cautious. Their first stop was Ruby's place, where they shopped for some snorkeling gear and an underwater video camera. The shop was crowded with surfers who were picking up last-minute supplies for Saturday's Gulf Coast surf-off. Hi, guys, Ruby Blackwell looked up from some customers she was helping. Back for more surfing? It's not much of a day for it, I'm afraid. We're going snorkeling after brunch today, out near Shipwreck Reef, Danny replied. I want to show Nancy and Bess some of our underwater scenery. Ruby, you have a call on line 1, a harried-looking clerk called out. The clerk was cradling a phone between his shoulder and ear as he waited on a customer at the front office. I'll take it in the office, Neil, Ruby replied. What a day, she exclaimed to Nancy and the others. Neil and I have been working here all night, doing our half-year inventory just to keep the computer honest. Ruby headed for the back of the shop and ducked through a doorway that was covered by a curtain of brightly colored beads. A few minutes later, Nancy was looking at a display of wetsuits near the doorway to Ruby's office when she overheard Ruby talking on the phone. You know I'm good for it. Ruby's tone was low and tense. I'll have the money for you next week, for sure. There was a long pause. No, don't do that. Don't! You let me take care of it, she said. Nancy thought she heard the telephone receiver being slammed down. She took a step back. Was Ruby in trouble? She'd sounded afraid of the person she'd been talking to on the phone. Nancy pretended to be absorbed in looking at the wetsuits when Ruby brushed back the curtain of beads and came out, almost knocking into her. Nancy, Ruby said, I didn't know you were standing right there. Is there anything I can show you? Nancy thought that Ruby was startled and annoyed to see Nancy there. I was just looking around, Nancy replied, but I'll let you know if I need any help, though. Ruby nodded and then made her way back to the customers she'd been helping. Nancy waited until Ruby and the clerk were busy with customers up front. Then she tiptoed into the back office, taking care not to rattle the beaded curtain as she passed through it. Nancy glanced around the small office. A collection of photos hanging on the wall were of Ruby surfing or posing with her board on different tropical beaches. The photos must date back to her professional surfing days, Nancy guessed. On the desk, Nancy noticed a stack of envelopes stuck on a spindle. The envelope on top of the stack was stamped Overdue Bill, Third Notice. Looks like Ruby's in some kind of financial bind, Nancy thought to herself. Ruby's phone conversation echoed uncomfortably in Nancy's mind. It sounded from the conversation as if Ruby was just being blackmailed. Just then, Nancy heard someone step outside the office. She peeked out and was relieved to see it was only a customer browsing. She slipped back outside through the beads, grateful that she hadn't been caught snooping. Nancy returned to join her friends up front. I guess we've got everything, Danny announced. Let's go grab some food. On the way out, they nearly bumped into Hank Carter, who was walking in the door. Hank was holding Ruby's sleek new Stinger surfboard under one arm. He stopped dead in his tracks when he spotted Josh. Hey, Josh. I took the Stinger for a trial run yesterday, Hank said. And let me tell you, come Saturday, this baby's gonna run circles around you and your battered old board, he said. Lighten up, Hank, Josh replied easily. This is a surfing contest, not a war. Hank snorted. These contests are battles, Josh, he replied. If you don't know that by now, you might as well drop out. You'll never make the big time. He brushed past them. Josh shook his head. Hank goes way over the top during these competitions, he said as they walked along the sidewalk. Out on the waves, he's cool as can be, but with people, he is a total jerk. Hank seems angry at the world and totally obsessed with winning, Nancy thought. Was he driven enough to sabotage Josh, his main competitor? Nancy turned to her friends. You three go on and start eating, she said. I want to ask Hank a few questions. Why? You think Hank could be involved? Josh acted concerned. He was out of bounds just now, but I've never thought of him as really dangerous. The threatening note this morning means that we have to examine everything and everyone in a new light, Nancy replied. Hank's your main competition, and he's been trying to rattle you all week. I'd say he's the most obvious person to investigate. Josh sighed. Maybe you're right, Nancy, he said heavily. Danny checked his watch. Okay, Nancy, we'll meet you in an hour at a place called Papa's. It's about 2 blocks east, he said, waving to indicate the general direction of the restaurant. After her friends left, Nancy hung around outside Ruby's place until Hank reemerged. Hank acted surprised, but pleased to see Nancy. Hey, how'd you manage to lose your friends? He smiled at her. Well, that's good, because I was hoping we'd have a chance to get to know each other. Nancy forced herself to flash him a brilliant smile. Hank, I'm trying to learn more about the surfing contest. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Fire away, Hank replied. I was just heading back to my place. You could tag along if you want. Hank's friendly manner quickly faded as Nancy described the events of the morning, including her discovery of the note threatening Josh. We've been trying to figure this all out, Nancy said, looking him straight in the eye. Do you have any ideas? I haven't the faintest idea about all that. Hank's stare was piercing and stony, and I certainly didn't have anything to do with it, if that's what you're getting at. He shook his head. I would be an idiot to try something like threatening Josh, especially since I don't need to, he added, taking her by the elbow. Come with me, Nancy. I want to show you something that might interest you. Hank led Nancy around the corner and down a short block. They climbed a narrow flight of stairs to an airy apartment on the second floor. Hank leaned his surfboard against the wall, walked across the room, and opened a cabinet that held a television set and a VCR. Now watch this, he said, and pulled a videotape from the lower shelf of the cabinet. Hank popped the tape into the VCR. The screen brightened with various shots that showed Hank performing daring maneuvers in various surfing contests. The video was underscored with music and professional-sounding narration. A television sports show in California taped this when I won the Sundown Surf Contest in Huntington Beach, he said with a note of pride. On the tape, Hank demonstrated some truly impressive surfing moves, including the difficult 360-degree air spin. When the tape had finished, Hank turned to face Nancy. You see, I don't need to scare Josh away from the contest this week because I'm going to win it fair and square, he said. Hank rewound the tape and swung open the door of his video cabinet. As he replaced his tape into the display rack, Nancy spotted a video labeled JB, tucked way in the back of the cabinet. JB might stand for Josh Brightman, Nancy thought. It might mean something very important. Nancy made a mental note to come back to check out the videotape when she got the chance. Just then, there was the loud sound of a door being banged open behind them. Before Nancy could turn around, the sound of a woman's shrill voice shattered the air. I've caught you, Hank Carter! The voice rasped close to Nancy's ear. The voice was then lowered to a menacing growl. I know just what you're doing, and you can't deny it this time. Nancy turned. Standing behind them in the doorway was Marissa, Hank's girlfriend. End of chapter 5. This is not one of the better Nancy Drew books. Look, you made me think again. I'm so sorry. Be thinking all day now. Ugh. I already told you who wrote it, some crackpot dummy. We need Nancy Solves Real Life Mysteries. Nancy and the D.B. Cooper Caper. And Nancy and the Book Depository Bullet. Clap, clap. Clap for chap 5 in stream. Thank you. Hello, hello. Thank you for the claps. How you doing? Things are getting hot and heavy. I mean, as much as they do in Nancy Drew books, I suppose. All right. This is kind of a short stream today, and I apologize, but I'm glad that I had the opportunity to stream at all. Excuse me. If I'm feeling up to it, I don't like making promises, so please know every time I say I'm going to try this. Oh, wait, hang on a second. Did that look cool? I just noticed this was still on the thing. I hate making promises, so please know every time I say I'm going to try to do something or I might do something, that's always a might. I might try to stream tomorrow morning because I work the afternoon shift, so it is possible that I could stream tomorrow morning sometime. So if that happens, it'll probably be Cap and Toad. We got to go back and do some gem grinding, so yay for that. But it'll be fun anyway. I'm glad that you guys had fun. Yeah, it depends on the Nancy Drew book how hot and heavy it gets. I mean, we have read books where there has been lots of kissing, which is weird. But you do that all the time? You do what all the time? Oh, say you might stream and don't. Yeah, I know. Just kidding. You're welcome for stream. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you and everybody here. Kissing, cults, funds. I know. She might do a 48-hour stream for New Year's, except for I have to work both New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, because why wouldn't I have to? Yeah, no. Have a good day, everyone. You're welcome for streaming. Please take care of yourselves, as always. Much love from me to you. I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.